Hey guys, it's Lisa Lillian, also known as Hungry Girl, here just to let you know, if you are listening to this and you don't currently subscribe to this podcast, you should. So wherever you're listening from, click subscribe. And also, if you don't get our daily emails, that's a big mistake. So go to hungry-girl.com to sign up for our free daily emails. And if you're bored every other Thursday night, I have a live show on Amazon. So you can go to hungry-girl.com/Amazon Live. Thanks. Hope you love the episode.
Hungry girl. Get free fries and ice cream swirls. Tips and tricks from Hungry Girl. 'Cause it's a hungry world.
I'm so hungry. Hey there, it's me, Lisa Lillian, also known as Hungry Girl. Very excited for today's episode of True the Right Thing. It is a one-on-one interview with my personal friend, very close friend, who is also a health journalist, author of 4 books on health and wellness, and he also has a PhD in public health. He is super impressive. His name is Dr. Robert J. Davis. Now, if that name sounds familiar, some of you might remember him because he joined us on the Hungry Girl cruise a couple of years back, and everybody loved him. And occasionally he comes on these podcasts. And what I love about Robert is that he breaks it down. He is also known as the healthy skeptic. And what he does is he will help us distinguish between truth and lies in health and wellness. And his latest book is called Supersize Lies. And the tagline of that book is How Myths About Weight Loss Are Keeping Us Fat and the Truth About What Really Works. It is a great book. It was the winner of a 2022 Best Book Awards, nutrition and fitness category. So it's a good book. I love it. I love how easy it is to read. He is such a clever writer, and everything is just so easy to digest, no pun intended. And he's also fun to talk to. So stick around, listen to the whole podcast. He is breaking down everything. There's a lot of stuff we'll be discussing today. And if you stay till the end, you're going to find a chance to win a copy of his book. So don't stop midway because I want you to win a copy. All right, thanks. Let's jump right in. Well, welcome, Robert.
Thank you, Lisa. Great to be with you.
Great to have you. Should I call you Robert or Dr. Davis?
Robert is fine.
Okay. We know. We go way back. But for those of you who don't know exactly who you are, why don't you give like I don't want to say the elevator pitch. How about a broken elevator pitch?
Broken elevator. Okay, I like that.
So you could take a little longer to give people the background on you and all that you do.
Well, I am a health journalist by profession. I've spent many years writing about health issues and also producing video content. Also have a background in public health, a PhD, master's degree in epidemiology. So what I do is to try to look at the research using the training I have to actually look at the studies to help people understand what's true, what's not true, what's believable, what's not believable. Because as we know, when it comes to so many things around weight loss and diet and nutrition and fitness and wellness, there's so much misinformation, so much hype, so much confusing information, so much clutter. So I try to help people figure out really what the science actually shows so they can make more informed decisions about what's best for them.
And you are the healthy skeptic.
I am, indeed.
It's a good name. It's not a misnomer. And you have a couple of books. Well, you have 4 books in total. And why don't you just run down what they are and tell us a little bit about your latest book?
Sure. My latest book is called Supersize Lies. And what I do in that book is to look at all kinds of claims around weight loss. And try to look at the science behind those claims and help people figure out which ones are true. I also look at what actually works, what the science shows actually works in terms of all kinds of different approaches that people take to help them lose weight. We know that there's no one size fits all, obviously, but I try to help people, guide people toward what might be appropriate and helpful to them. That's my most recent book, as I said. Before that, I wrote a book called Fitter, Faster, which looks at the science of exercise, helping people figure out, again, what's true and what's not about exercise, and actually presenting a plan, an exercise plan that people can follow regardless of their fitness level, regardless of their experience with exercise, to help people overcome the barriers that so many of us have when it comes to exercise. Also, we've written a book called Coffee is Good for You, which looks at all kinds of different claims, everything from red meat to red wine regarding nutrition and food, and helping people sort through in what I hope is an entertaining way and helpful way to figure out which claims are believable and which are not. And then my first book, called The Healthy Skeptic, where my name came from, looks at a number of different claims around health and wellness and looks at the story behind the stories to help people understand where this information comes from and how and why it's often distorted, whether it's money or agendas or other issues that result in skewed advice that we get, and how to sort through all of this advice.
Well, your books are amazing. I will say this. I mean, the way you speak matter-of-factly about everything in a way that everybody understands it, but the writing in your book is very, very easy to digest, no pun intended, and easy to read and easy to understand, and yet entertaining, which is so hard to do in a lot of the topics that you broach upon, because sometimes it's like complicated, and your whole thing is that you break it down, and how you break it down is just easy to understand for anyone. So I think that's why all of your books resonate so well with our audience. So the latest book is specifically about weight loss. And it's interesting because weight loss has been such a huge part of our society for as long as I can remember, except in the past couple of years, I think the tides have turned. And I'd love to first talk before, I was thinking about getting into this topic after, but I really want to jump in first with this topic. The idea that, I understand body positivity, and we can get into that, but also healthy at any size, people just accepting obesity or the fact that they are, not at a healthy weight, and how that really does affect people. And first, I want to ask why you think it is. Why do you think people think that's okay now? And then let's talk a little bit about whether or not you agree with that.
Sure. Well, first of all, I will say that the impetus behind things like health at every size or body positivity is good, in the sense that we all know the dangers and the harms of diet culture, both physical and emotional. When people go on diets, they lose weight, they regain weight, they go on another diet, lose weight, gain weight, go through this weight cycling. And we know that that is very damaging emotionally and physically. I'm sure there are many listeners who've been through this experience and have suffered through this, and the damage it causes in so many different ways. And so I think the impetus behind this is to not only help people break free of that mentality and that cycle, but also feel better about themselves so they don't judge themselves based on their weight, so that there's not this sense, or try to lessen this sense of internalized stigma about weight and self-blame over it's my fault, I can't succeed on these diets, when really the problem is the diets themselves. So in that sense, I think this move toward body positivity and health at every size is a good thing. The problem, as I see it, though, is, as you say, when body positivity movement and others say that there is no link between obesity and health risks. When studies come out showing some kind of increased risk, they'll deny the science and say it's not true. Or they will say that those who are bringing this up are fat shaming, and accuse those who even bring up the issue of the risks of obesity as fat shaming, and try to squelch any kind of conversation. I think when that happens, it does a terrible disservice to everybody, because these risks are very real, and that is undeniable. The science is undeniable that obesity and excess weight contributes to a number of health conditions, including type 2 diabetes. We see there's an epidemic of type 2 diabetes because of increasing rates of obesity, heart disease, strokes, certain cancers, reproductive issues. The list goes on and on and on. And most recently,
why are people in denial about it?
Well, most recently, I was going to say we see COVID-19. That's been a very important factor in COVID-19 hospitalizations and deaths, the relatively high obesity rate. This is well documented that people who are obese have worse outcomes. And so I think that, as with many things, the pendulum has swung too far in this effort to try to deal with the very real problem of stigma and internalized stigma and societal stigma, that advocates have gone too far and said we can't even have a conversation about the risks of obesity. And I think that we need to come back to a happy medium where we acknowledge the problems of diet culture and the harms that it causes, but at the same time are honest about the potential harms of obesity, so that people we can help people find a way to love yourself, to feel good about yourself regardless of your weight, but at the same time, do whatever you can to make yourself healthy and arrive at a healthy weight for you. Now, that doesn't mean you should go on a crash diet. It doesn't mean that you need to be thin, but it does mean that we should help people find a way to be healthy and to arrive at a healthy and sustainable weight for them.
Yeah, and I don't know why it's so black and white. Why can't it be both things? And I think that the happier people are and the more they accept the way they look, even if they are a little bit overweight, that'll put them in a better frame of mind to actually think about their health and achieving a healthy weight. But it's just frustrating to me that people, maybe it's our culture, it's our country, the way society is like, this is good, this is bad. There's no gray area. And I do agree that it's doing a disservice to people and their health. And I don't know how we can change that. How do we do that, Robert? Can we do that together?
Well, I think when we talk about this issue, we need to always acknowledge what the advocates of body positivity are saying, which is that, yes, we understand that diet culture and this obsession with weight loss, the damage it can have, and to be sympathetic and understanding. And I think it's important to do that, but then to transition into it at the same time. While we understand that, we also want to talk about in an honest way about the risks of obesity and what people can do in a way that's going to allow them to maintain a positive body image.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that it's easier for people who have failed over and over or who yo-yo up and down to just say, well, it doesn't matter. I love myself this way and, I can be healthy at any size, when they don't want to really face the facts. But the facts are the facts. And getting down to business, because if there's any audience out there that still does care about losing weight, it's probably the Hungry Girl audience. They still really do want to lose weight on some level. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be listening to the podcast and reading, my daily emails and the books. So getting right down to it, what do you think is the biggest problem with our society and why people can't achieve and maintain healthy weights?
Well, I think that's obviously a very complicated issue, and there's so many factors that are involved. One certainly is just the ubiquity of food in our society. There's food tempting us everywhere we go, whether you go to the office, whether you go to the airport, whether you go to Home Depot, wherever you go, there's food. And certainly we have large portions. And so if you look at eating habits and food availability now versus, say, 50 years ago, there's an enormous difference. So I think just the availability of food is a big issue. And we all know that when we're presented with food, many of us are just going to simply eat more. If the portions are larger or there's more food available, we're going to eat more. And so I think
that's an American thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Because when I visit, I've been in some European countries and there's like no food. When I was in France, it's like we wanted a snack. There was not a snack to be had. You could walk the town. If you want a snack, you have to sit at a beautiful cafe, make a commitment. You have to order, your lunch. You can't just walk and buy a snack. And here, everything we do revolves around food. And you're right, we're hit over the head with food wherever we turn.
Yeah.
And it is hard to resist. It's not our fault. It's right. It's hard to resist.
Right. It is hard to resist. And the second thing I would say is it's the types of food. The fact that we have so many what are now being termed ultra-processed foods that we all eat because we have busy lives and these foods are available and they're easy and they're inexpensive. But things like packaged foods, frozen pizza, fast food, all the rest, foods that we all know aren't great for us, but that are, as the experts say, highly palatable, meaning that they're easy to eat and they go down quickly, and yet they often leave us even hungrier. And so we have increasing evidence that these foods are contributing to the obesity epidemic by in various ways making us eat more and
keeping us hungry, right?
And keeping us hungry so that we keep eating more. And they're designed to do exactly that.
Exactly that. And that's the scary part. So I want to talk a little bit about that because I always said, and I still to this day say, if there was just like a safe way to curb your appetite, whoever invented that would make bazillions of dollars. And boy, it would help a lot of people because people are eating a lot of the time because they are hungry. And I know that there are some drugs now that have been sort of highly used by people with diabetes, like Ozempic. And the reason why people are losing weight as a side effect is because it's curbing their appetite. I'm assuming that's what it is. It's not speeding up metabolism.
Correct.
So how do you feel about that and the idea of using drugs like that to curb your appetite?
For people who have a lot of weight to lose, that is people who are classified as obese, or people who are classified as overweight and have a weight-related condition like diabetes. I think for certain people, these drugs can be very helpful. For people who've tried and failed with different diets and struggled and they're facing health risks, particularly, I think that these drugs can be an important adjunct. And the one you just described is Ozempic, which is actually a diabetes drug. There's actually a weight loss version of that same drug, only at a higher dose. It's called Wegovy, that was introduced onto the market a few years ago.
Wait, so they're a similar drug?
They're the same exact molecule. They both work the same way. It's just that Wegovy is a higher dose of the same medication.
So what if you have diabetes and you use the Wegovy?
That would be too high a dose. You want to use Ozempic for the doctor would prescribe Ozempic. Now, it's also true though that the lower dose Ozempic can actually result in weight loss, not as much as Wegovy, but using Ozempic can actually result in some weight loss. Wegovy can result in significant weight loss, according to the studies, as much as 15% of people's body weight is lost. That's a lot.
Is it because it makes them less hungry and they're eating less?
Exactly. It mimics a hormone that tells the brain that we're full.
Is it
called
dangerous?
GLP-1. So far in studies, the main issues, and again, it's only been studied about 16 months in the trials that were done for it. So based on those trials, it can cause side effects like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, which is
That'll stop you from eating.
Right, which is nothing to be taken lightly. So that it does cause side effects, and that is enough for some people to stop the drug and not be able to take it. But for people who can tolerate the drug, it's generally found to be safe. Now that said, as I said, it's only been tested 16 months. These are drugs that you need to stay on presumably for your entire life, because if you go off the drug, you gain the weight back. And right now, we don't know if there are any long-term effects because it hasn't been around that long. So when people take this, they have to consider that we don't know if there are risks. And I have to say, there's a long history of weight loss drugs like this that came out that were, hailed as the next greatest thing with weight loss that did result in weight loss, but only to be found later to cause serious side effects. There's the highway is littered with these drugs over the last 100 years. Now, I'm not saying that Wegovy will be the same thing. It may turn out, in fact, to be safe in the long run, but the truth is we don't know at the moment whether it's safe long term. And so when people take this drug, they have to balance, okay, I know that this could be helpful to me, and I'm facing health risks potentially from being obese or overweight. So this drug could potentially be very beneficial. But at the same time, there are potentially unknown risks from taking this drug over the long run.
Right. And I don't want to gloss over something you said that I think is really important. It's that when you stop, they're going to be hungry again. They've learned nothing about how to eat, in a healthy way and maintain weight. It's just, once you're hungry, they're going to start their old habits and probably gain the weight back.
Yes.
So for me, how I have tricked myself, I like to eat a lot of high water volume foods. I'll eat a lot of vegetables. I'll eat a lot of things that are lower in calories so I can eat more of it. And I always say that's to me what you have to do long term, because any quick fix could work. But the minute you stop, if you don't figure it out for yourself, you're just going to be back at square one. And I think that you were saying the same thing, because it's people go into these yo-yo modes and they're not really solving a problem. They're just there's a Band-Aid fix and then the Band-Aid's gone.
I think that's a very important point. And to be fair, the makers of the drug say that it can't be a standalone fix, that people have to also focus on lifestyle measures like changing their diet and exercise. But I think that sometimes that doesn't happen. And so people will just rely on the drug. And so as you say, it may be that if they go off the drug, they're back at square one and those behaviors are still in place.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what about probiotics? So I hear a lot about probiotics, prebiotics. I don't exactly know what they are. People say they're really good for digestion. Sometimes I take them, sometimes I don't. I don't know. I don't know if it's good, if it's bad, if it helps with weight loss, weight maintenance. What do you know about probiotics?
Well, what I can tell you is, first of all, what they are. Probiotics are essentially good bacteria, beneficial bacteria and other microorganisms. It sounds disgusting in a way because you're eating live organisms. You're eating live microorganisms. And the idea behind that is that there's a mix of microbes in our gut. As sometimes you hear about the microbiome, and there's a lot about the microbiome now and more studies around that. But regarding weight loss, what the studies show in weight control is that people who are lean have a different mix of microbes in their gut than people who are heavy. And so the idea behind using probiotics is that if you take these live microorganisms, these live bacteria, these good bacteria, it can actually change the mix of microbes in your gut and promote weight loss. So that's the theory behind it.
All right, I have a question. So if people that are thin have a different mix, is it because they were born that way and this is naturally thin people? Or once you lose the weight, the mix of bacteria changes?
That's unclear. That's still being studied. But we do know that from animal studies, it can change because they've actually done studies in rodents where they actually took the microbiome of an obese mouse and put it into a lean mouse, and that lean mouse becomes obese. And so, and that's actually been done in people as well, sort of accidentally when they were doing transplants in people, fecal transplants for other reasons. So the point is that it can change, but why it happens initially is not clear. There's some indication it may have something to do with diet, because we know that diet can actually, the food you eat can actually affect your microbiome. So we know that eating a lot of fiber, for example, can promote the growth of these beneficial bacteria that are more conducive to a lower weight. Again, a lot of this is still in its infancy, so a lot is not understood, but there is increasing evidence that there is a connection here.
Okay. And in general, I know there's so many different kinds of probiotics and then also prebiotics, which we didn't even get into. But how do you know, like a lot of times it'll promote on the bottle thousands of X, Y, and Z. And you're like,
Right.
Do I need hundreds? Do I need thousands? What do I take? Why? Forget about weight loss. Like, what should the average person take or think about taking in terms of probiotics?
Yeah, well, that's why this is so confusing, because there are so many different kinds of probiotics. I mean, probiotics essentially have three names. They have a first name, a middle name, and a last name, and there are various combinations of all these three names. And so the last name is often called a strain. You often hear just these things described in terms of strains. And so there are many different strains of these probiotics. So what the research that does exist shows that specific strains can be helpful for specific conditions. But the point is that you need to match the right strain to know what strain and what condition you're talking about. So just going and taking probiotics to take probiotics is not going to be helpful, because you may be taking the wrong probiotic, or you may be taking it for something for which there's not evidence. With regard to weight loss specifically, there are some studies that they're preliminary and small and short term, I should say that, but they do suggest that taking certain probiotics can be helpful a bit when it comes to weight loss. And there's one in particular, two in particular that I think I've seen studies on. One called LG2055 that's been studied. I'll say that again, LG2055.
That's not a sexy name.
That's been studied that shows some effect on weight loss.
But how does anyone know? I don't know. It's just too complicated.
Well,
it's like,
I would
how
say,
do you know
I
what
would,
to
I would
buy?
tell people to go to a site called consumerlab.com. I'm a big fan of consumerlab.com. That's an organization that independently tests all kinds of supplements, including probiotics. And so not only does it have research that says if you're concerned about this condition, here's the right brand to take, but they also test these brands to show that they actually contain what's listed on the label, because we know with any kind of supplements, probiotics or otherwise, they're not regulated the way that prescription drugs are. And so you can't be sure they actually say what's listed on the label. You can't be sure of a lot of things. And so this organization actually does independent testing so you can be more certain that what you're buying is actually a good product and is actually designed for the specific indication.
Oh, that's good.
Consumerlab.com. There's a small
Consumerlab.com.
yearly fee, but it's, I believe, well worth it to
Just
get
give
good
everyone your
information.
login info, Robert. No, but thank you for that.
What is the secret to making great toast?
Oh, you're just going to go in with the hard-hitting questions.
I'm Dan Pashman from The Sporkful. We like to say it's not for foodies, it's for eaters. We use food to learn about culture, history, and science. There was the time we looked into allegations of discrimination at Bon Appetit, or when I spent 3 years inventing a new pasta shape.
It's a complex noodle that you put together.
Every episode of The Sporkful, you're going to learn something, feel something, and laugh. The Sporkful from Stitcher. Get it wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, changing subjects to something that's slightly a little more relatable that everyone in the audience can think about, like how it will affect them. Milks, like plant milks and versus dairy milk. When I first started Hungry Girl, like almond milk was the most groundbreaking thing in the world. Rice milk was like Ooh, like only 2 people I knew ever tried rice milk. Any kind of non-dairy milk. Now there's every kind of milk under the sun.
Right.
Macadamia milk, cashew milk, almond milk, oat milk. They're all out there. And so my question around those, what do you feel about them as far as nutrition and as far as potential for weight loss? Let's compare notes on that.
Okay. So I would say that for people that can't eat or don't want to consume dairy, they can be a good alternative. But people should not assume that just because it's a plant milk or a non-dairy milk that it's necessarily healthy. I think sometimes there's this health halo. You talk a lot about health halos, I know. And often there's this health halo over plant milks that people just assume, well, I should get that because it's better. Well, not necessarily. And whether it's better and whether it's good for you really depends on what you're mainly concerned about. Are you concerned about fewer calories? Are you concerned about less saturated fat? Are you concerned about more protein? Are you concerned about sugar, whatever it is? And so what you're concerned about determines which particular milk is best for you. And so, and also remember that within each category, there are different versions. So within almond, there are all kinds of different versions. So I think, we can go through which ones are best if you want to for different things that you might be interested in. But I think that it's important first to establish what it is that you're most concerned about with regard to your health.
And people need to really read those labels. That's what I always say. Because for
Absolutely.
me, I like using the milks that will add creaminess and flavor for anything I'm having, whether it's coffee, cereal, recipes. But I don't want the sugar, so I always get unsweetened.
Yep.
And I like the creaminess of a lot of these milks because skim milk, although it has a lot of protein, doesn't have a lot of flavor.
Right.
So I just think it's about reading those labels too. But
And as you say, it may depend on what you're using it for. What you use, for example, for your coffee and using a little bit is different than if you're using it for something else,
like
for using a lot
oatmeal
more.
and using a full
Yeah.
cup or something. So tell me a little bit about what I always wonder, and maybe you know the answer to this. Oat milk, to me, is far and away the best tasting
Right.
of all of these milks. And it usually, or quite often, is the highest in calories and fat.
Correct.
Where do those calories and fat grams come from?
Well, if you look, for example, at extra creamy, which is the best tasting,
Sure.
but it's also the highest in calories. It actually has 160 calories typically, which is even more than whole milk.
Yes.
They actually add oil to it, so they add
Oh,
things to it
wow.
to make it creamier. If you look at the label, you see that they add things to it.
That's
But the
that's
ones that are just
shocking.
the other oat milks, it's just the nature of the product that just tastes creamier, and that's an important factor because some of them, as you say, taste more watery, and others taste thicker or
what
are
kind
thicker
of milk
and
do you
taste more.
drink?
I go for soy. And now some people don't like soy or don't prefer to stay away from soy because they've heard that it promotes breast cancer or it mimics estrogen, and that may result in feminine characteristics in men. That is not true. That research is not. Those are not necessarily valid concerns. Now, people don't like soy or can't tolerate soy for other reasons, as we've discussed. There are plenty of other options, but soy for me works because it is relatively high in protein. It has the same amount of protein essentially as dairy milk. And I like the taste. I go for the unsweetened version because it has no added sugar. That's the one I prefer in terms of taste and other things that are of interest to me, which is protein primarily.
Okay, I'm going to rattle some milks off, and you're going to tell me why you like or don't like them.
Okay.
Coconut milk. And I mean like coconut, not the coconut milk in a can that has 9 million calories and sugar.
So coconut milk, the concern there is the saturated fat. If people are concerned about saturated fat, it actually has as much saturated fat as whole milk. Now, not everybody's concerned about saturated fat, I know, but if people are concerned because, for example, they are concerned about their cholesterol, that would be one to avoid. But otherwise, the other issue is it has virtually no protein. So if you want to get protein, that one is near the bottom of the barrel, if not at the bottom of the barrel with regard to protein.
What about nut milks? Are they all the same? Like if you do almond, macadamia, or cashew?
Okay, so almond, it all depends again on which almond you're talking about. So if you're going with unsweetened almond milk, that is going to be a good choice because it's very low in calories. It and cashew have the lowest calories. So I think you get 25 or 30 calories
For a cup.
per serving in cashew or almond. So if your concern is calories, those two are going to be your best bet. But again, we're talking about the unsweetened version of almond milk. If you go for the vanilla, you're going to be getting 12 grams of sugar
Unless you get vanilla unsweetened.
Unless you get vanilla unsweetened,
That's
which
my
again,
pick.
see, that's exactly. But if you go for so it's easy though for people to say, okay, well, almond milk, that sounds healthy. It's made from nuts. I'm going to get the vanilla. That sounds good. Well, you end up with 12 grams of sugar per serving. That's as much as you get in a serving of Frosted Flakes. So if you pour that milk on your Frosted Flakes, you're doubling the sugar in your Frosted Flakes, which is easy for people to overlook. So again, that's an example of read those labels, as you say,
You have to
before
read
you
the
make
labels.
assumptions.
Absolutely. Okay, let's move on to a topic that was super hot a few years ago. And I don't know if it's quite as hot, but I know in my world, at least, a lot of people say they do this and it helps them for weight loss. And that is grazing. It's the idea that eating small meals throughout the day somehow helps them either lose or maintain weight.
Right. And so to be clear here, we're talking about eating every potentially 2 to 3 hours as opposed to 3 meals a day. And sometimes people confuse that with snacking, where you eat 3 meals a day and snacks in between. This is different, where you're just eating a bunch of small meals
But
throughout
it's
the day.
kind of the same. Like small
Yeah.
meals are snacks.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Well, I think that what the theory behind this is twofold. Number one is that it increases metabolism because, when we eat, it takes energy to burn, it takes calories. We use energy to digest our food, right? So that the idea is the more often you eat, the greater your metabolism will be. That's the first rationale. The second is that it decreases hunger. So if you eat more, you're not going to be as hungry. So the studies actually have failed to show the first, that it actually increases metabolism. Studies have failed to show that it actually boosts metabolism. However, the studies do show that it can decrease hunger. And that's not too surprising.
Eating every few hours
yes,
can
decreases
decrease
hunger. So that's not a shocker, exactly. The problem is, does that translate into weight loss? And a number of studies, most studies have generally failed to show that it results in weight. And some studies even show that it results in weight gain.
I think it's human error. Human error. If people are eating every 2 to 3 hours and misunderstanding what a snack is or how many calories they're intaking, then they're probably taking in more calories than they would if they had 3 meals
I think
a day.
that is potentially, one of the main factors here. It's very hard for people to properly, obviously, estimate their calories, and they think, oh, well, it's just a few hundred calories, and it may be 500 or 600 calories. But it's also important, obviously, to think about what you're eating. So if you're at the office and your idea of grazing is to eat donuts and candy that's at the office, that's very different than if you're going to be eating carrots and fruits and other kinds of filling whole foods. And so I think that's a big factor there too. So I think the bottom line is it really depends on you. It depends on your ability to control portions. It depends on what you're eating. And so I think for certain people, it can work very well. And a lot of people I know swear by this. I think the mistake though is then when this is held up is the answer to weight control. Everybody needs to eat 6 meals a day instead of 3, and that will help you control your weight. And then people try this and find that it fails. Well, again, it's not necessarily the people who fail. It's that this idea is not right for everybody. It's right for some, but not right for everybody.
And it sounds like you're saying that basically the calories in versus calories burned, it's the tried and true formula that just you can't get around, right?
Yeah. So if you end up eating 6 times a day and consume more calories than you would if you ate 3 times a day, then clearly it's not going to work. I mean, I would just say that really it boils down to what works for you, because there's no set number of times to eat that's ideal. We eat 3 times a day because that's cultural, but there's nothing biological about eating 3 times a day. So for some people, they eat once a day and that works for them. They are fasting diet maybe. Other people can eat 6 times a day, but really you have to figure out based on your schedule and your personality and your preferences, what's going to work for you. And so I think there's no magical number of times a day to eat, biologically speaking, that is optimal.
And I know we have had a conversation, not on a podcast, so we can go over this again, but your thoughts on intermittent fasting. I personally have had a lot of success with eating for a limited number of hours throughout the day. It could just be because I was drastically, decreasing my calorie intake. But what are your thoughts about intermittent fasting?
I think for certain people, intermittent fasting can be effective. Studies do show that it's effective for weight loss, but not necessarily more effective than a calorie-restricted diet. But I think for some people, they find that it's easier to follow than just cutting calories. So they find that they eat,
Right,
within a
they
certain
can have
window.
if they can eat the sandwich that they want.
Yeah.
Instead of just eating a salad or just
Right.
restricting calories, they feel more freedom to eat the foods that satisfy them. But because it's a smaller window, they're taking in fewer calories.
Exactly. And so and again, it depends on if that works for you, that's great. But for other people, they find that if they can't eat beyond certain times, they become more obsessed with food even, so it doesn't work for them. I think one caveat is that some research has shown that when people go on intermittent fasting diets, they tend to lose more muscle mass than people who go on calorie-restricted diet.
Why is that?
Well, it's unclear. And so I think there needs to be more research to figure out whether this is true, and if so, why. But that's a potential caveat, because clearly you want to lose fat, you don't want to lose muscle mass.
Right. Well, maybe, I mean, I'm just guessing, maybe if there's no food like getting into your muscles for like too long of a period of time, your muscles become less muscly.
That could be.
Robert, do you want to speak to that?
I am not going to venture a guess on that, but I will say that people just need to be aware of that, because obviously the goal, that's a very important point. I mean, if you lose weight and you lose muscle, that's not good. So, but I think with regard to intermittent fasting, I don't condemn it. I think that it can work for some people, and if it does work, great. But I don't think that people should assume that, again, this is the way and the best way, and if you try it and it fails, then you're a failure. Because I get back to what I always say, which is that everybody's different, and you need to figure out what works for you. And just because something works for someone else or works for somebody on social media doesn't mean it's right for you.
I know. And I really personally really don't like how judgy people have become about foods. I mean, because I always have said, whatever works for you. And it's not one size fits all. And I've noticed in the world of intuitive eating, there's a lot of people that are, all the intuitive eaters almost become angry at the people who are counting calories or who are dieting. And if you're an intuitive eater and that works for you, great. Rah, rah, rah. You're a person who maybe you ate French fries every day for a week and now you don't ever want to see a French fry again. I don't know that that works for everybody. I really do want to get your take on intuitive eating. And also, for people who don't know what it is, maybe you can just give a rundown of what it is.
Right. Well, it has a number of principles, and I won't, state all of them. I don't even know if I know them all offhand, but I can say that the whole idea behind intuitive eating is to help people break free of diet culture and diet mentality. So the people who have been on diet after diet and lost weight and gained weight and been through this yo-yoing, this weight cycling, to break free of all that mentality and that all the harmful effects of that. And so the idea here, there are several principles. It's to not to starve yourself, so you enjoy eating, not to deprive yourself, but to enjoy the foods that you want to eat, to listen to your body so that you eat when you're hungry and you stop eating when you're full. There are other aspects of it, is to help you cope with emotions or tell you that you should, if you're an emotional eater, to deal with those emotions in other ways besides with food.
That's a huge one.
Yeah, and I'll come and I can tell you why.
It's just really hard to be like, oh, by the way, when you're going to emotionally eat, don't do that.
They're right. And there are other aspects of it that I find to be quite good to help people feel better about themselves so that they don't judge themselves by their weight and they don't have unrealistic expectations about what they can achieve. They focus on movement for its own sake. So exercise is not a way to lose weight, but it's something to help you feel better emotionally and physically. And you focus on healthy food choices. So you try to be as healthy as you can, but not to beat yourself up if you're not perfect. So a lot of those things I would say are very good because we know the dangers, the harms of diet culture, of being on diet. So I think it can be a very good thing, intuitive eating, to help people break free of this mentality, this harmful way of thinking about food and calories and judging yourself about your weight. Now, that said, I think there are some concerns I have. The most important of these is that this concept, which is central to intuitive eating, which is you need to listen to your body for your hunger cues. Sounds good. The problem is that it is a very complicated, this idea of hunger cues is very complex because we have internal hunger cues, and we have external hunger cues. And so it says, listen to your internal hunger cues. The problem is it's really hard to separate the internal cues from the external cues. And by that, I mean, I'll give you an example of an external cue. Every day in the afternoon, I eat a snack because I think I'm hungry. Well, am I hungry because it's a habit? Do I think I'm hungry because the clock says 3 o'clock? I don't know. Am I really hungry or not? All I know is that I feel a need to eat a snack every day. And so it's hard for me to disentangle all that, whether I'm truly hungry or whether it's a matter of habit. Likewise, we see food everywhere we go, and that certainly entices us when we see food or we see ads for food. So those are examples of external cues that can make us hungry, and it's hard for us to know whether that's really an internal signal or an external signal. How do we distinguish between the two?
And wait, let me add to that. Sometimes an internal signal might be anxiety, frustration, fear, sadness, happiness. all of those things are real. And a lot of people think those emotions make them feel hungry. So
Right.
that also throws a wrench into it. I feel like my feeling, intuitive eating is great if it works for you, but I feel like it's a really big psychological commitment. That's like a bigger picture thing that can it fit into are you ready for that commitment to be that aware of your behaviors and your feelings and your lifestyle? I don't know. That's just me. That's what I
would
feel.
agree with that. And about emotional eating, I would say that this idea that you need to find other ways to deal with the emotions, that is a obviously incredibly complex thing to do. And it's something that people can't just flip a switch and do that. Often it requires professional help, counseling to get to the root of why it is that people use food and how to channel or how to deal with those emotions in other ways besides with food. So it's not something people often can just do on their own. And so I think intuitive eating sometimes, I think, gives short shrift to the difficulty of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it would solve the world's weight problems in one fell swoop if people could do that. I think it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
other
right.
than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the opera? It's like, I don't know.
So
That's
my
feeling.
bottom line on intuitive eating is I think it can be for certain people a very good transition away from being stuck in diet culture. The question is, what is it transitioning you to? Because I would say, in my view, the key over the long run to achieving and maintaining a healthy weight is learning new habits, lifestyle and health and eating habits. And I'm just not convinced that intuitive eating really focuses on that enough to help people do that. Obviously, doing that is very time consuming. It requires a lot of trial and error. It requires figuring out what's right for you. It requires a lot of time and patience. And it's one thing to transition away, which is a good thing potentially from diet mentality, but then to try to get you to where you need to go to this idea of learning new habits and having those ingrained so eating a new way of eating becomes automatic, that's another matter. And I'm not convinced that intuitive eating really does a good enough job of helping people actually get there. So I would say that it's a good start to remove yourself from from diet mentality, but I think there needs to be more for people to truly achieve a healthy weight long term.
I couldn't agree more. And we are running out of time. So I want you to tell people a little bit more about your book and why your book can help them with some of the struggles that they may be facing as far as losing and maintaining weight.
Sure. Well, Supersize Lies goes through a lot of the things that people often hear, a lot of the different claims about what's going to help you. And what I try to do is look at the science and help you figure out, is this really true? Is this really believable? And to help people better understand what the science says, and then to point them toward methods that are going to be the most effective. And again, my approach here is not to tell you, this is not a diet prescription book to say, do X, Y, and Z and you'll lose weight. The idea is to direct you toward different things that have been proven to work in the literature so that you can take these and try these for yourselves to figure out what are going to work for you. And so the bottom line is to give you better information about what works and what doesn't work so you can make better decisions for yourself.
And I love that. And I feel like when I do read this book, I feel like certain things resonate with me. And I feel like when people read the book, they will see what resonates within themselves and at least have real information to help them. Because the more you know yourself, the easier it will be to stick with whatever plan you come up with.
Absolutely.
So thank you. And thanks for being here. Will you come back?
I would love to. It's always fun to talk to you.
Great. Thank you, Robert. That was an amazing podcast. And if you guys want to win something, you want to win a copy of one of Robert's books, he has 4 great books. He will sign them, and we're going to give away, I think, a total of 5 books. Just text Mikey at 805-380-8075. And just say anything. Say you like the episode. Ask Robert a question. Let us know what you're thinking. But anyone who texts will be eligible, and we will choose the winners at random. And if you enjoyed Robert and you want to check him out, don't forget to look for healthyskeptic.com. That is his website, and you can find him on social media at Facebook. It's Robert Davis Healthy Skeptic, and on Instagram, Healthy Skept. That's HELTHYSKEPT. So you can find him everywhere. Don't forget, and don't forget to tune in next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Lisa Lillian, also known as Hungry Girl. Till next time, chew the right thing.